Imagine this. You're standing at your front door, and someone you buried decades ago is standing there. Older, thinner, weathered by time, but unmistakably alive. This isn't fiction. This happened. And the man at the center of this story didn't just come home late from war. He came home 30 years after everyone else. March 1974, Lubang Island, Philippines. A young Japanese explorer named Norio Suzuki set out into the jungle on what sounded like a strange adventure. He told friends he was searching for three things: a panda, the abominable snowman, and Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda. One of those three was real, and he had been fighting a war that ended nearly 3 decades earlier, 1944. 22-year-old Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda was sent to Lubang Island as an intelligence officer in the Imperial Japanese Army. His mission was clear: conduct guerrilla warfare, sabotage enemy operations, and never surrender, no matter what. His commanding officer told him something that would echo in his mind for the next 30 years. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we will come back for you. Onoda believed him. He and 3 other soldiers disappeared into the jungle. They built hidden camps. They rationed food. They waited. Then, on August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. The war was over. But in the jungle, it wasn't. The refusal leaflets were dropped from airplanes announcing Japan's surrender. Newspapers were left behind. Messages were broadcast over loudspeakers. Even letters from family members were delivered. But Onoda believed it was all a trick, psychological warfare designed to lure him out. So he ignored it. Years passed. One of his companions surrendered in 1950. Another was killed in 1954. The third died in a shootout in 1972. By then, Hiroo Onoda was alone, completely alone. For nearly 30 years, he lived in the jungle, sleeping in makeshift shelters, surviving on coconuts, bananas, stolen rice, and cattle he hunted, maintaining his rifle with obsessive discipline, still waiting, still fighting. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Japan rebuilt itself. Cities rose from ashes. Skyscrapers replaced ruins. Children grew up in peace. But on Lubang Island, gunshots still echoed. Onoda continued raiding villages for supplies. He shot at farmers he believed were enemy soldiers. In total, around 30 Filipino civilians were killed during his holdout. Farmers, fishermen, ordinary people, all casualties of a war that had already ended. Back in Japan, his family mourned him. They held a funeral. They believed he was dead. Even his mother, who kept a shrine for him, eventually accepted that he would never return. But in the jungle, time stood still. Then came Norio Suzuki, young, curious, determined. He had heard the legend of the soldier who refused to surrender, and he decided to find him, unarmed, alone. He entered the jungle and called out to him, not as an enemy, but as a fellow Japanese citizen. For 4 days, nothing happened. Then one night, in a moonlit clearing, Hiroo Onoda stepped out of the shadows, still in uniform, still armed, still convinced the war was ongoing. Suzuki told him the truth.
Japan had surrendered. It was 1974. The Beatles had broken up. The world had changed.
Onoda listened, but he refused to surrender. He said,
I will never lay down my weapons if orders aren't given by my commanding officer. The same officer who gave me orders in 1944.
The problem? That officer had been living peacefully in Japan for nearly 30 years. Major Yoshimi Taniguchi was now 68 years old. He ran a bookstore. The war was a distant memory. But when he heard that his former subordinate was still in the jungle, still following orders, he put on his old uniform and flew to the Philippines. On March 9th, 1974, in a quiet jungle clearing, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda stood at attention. After 10,672 days, Major Taniguchi looked at him and said,
The war ended long ago. You have served with honor. I relieve you of your duties.
For the first time in 29 years, Hiroo Onoda cried, coming home. He surrendered his sword, his rifle, his ammunition, everything perfectly maintained, still operational. When he returned to Japan, cameras flashed, crowds gathered. He was a sensation, but the country he came back to was not the one he left. He had departed from an empire at war. He returned to a peaceful, modern economic power. His mother was still alive, 91 years old. His brothers had families he had never met. He was treated as a hero by some, criticized by others, and haunted by the lives lost during his holdout. He later expressed regret for the Filipino civilians who died, but he also said something chillingly simple. He had only been following orders. The question: so what was Hiroo Onoda? A symbol of loyalty, or a man trapped by belief? When does duty become delusion? When does commitment become denial? His story forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Sometimes we fight battles long after they've ended. Sometimes we cling to missions that no longer serve us. Sometimes the hardest command to obey is the one that tells us to let go. Onoda eventually moved to Brazil. He raised cattle. Later, he returned to Japan and started a nature school for young people. In 1996, he went back to Lubang Island and donated money to a local school, a quiet gesture toward reconciliation. He died in 2014 at the age of 91. Nearly 70 years after the war, he refused to leave behind. How do you come home when home no longer exists? How do you reconcile the person you were with the person you've become? Hiroo Onoda's story isn't just about war. It's about belief, identity, and the human cost of refusing to change. Because sometimes the most difficult surrender is accepting that the battle is over. If you found this story powerful, subscribe and turn on notifications. History isn't just dates and battles. It's people, and sometimes the truth is stranger and heavier than fiction.